Occam's Razor, Book 1, Chapter 1, The Monks of Leprosia. Her last situation of the day, rescuing a little boy from a deep well, brought the Major within easy reach of Lysander, the small, beautiful planet where her good friend Emily lived. In no time at all, the Major found herself in Emily's treehouse, one of her favorite nooks in the universe, eating hot wing nuts, drinking cold hoppers, and laughing about old times when Emily was a ranger too. That was before she'd met Anchor, the best mechanic in the galaxy, and he'd swept her off her feet. "Where is the big lug, anyway?" asked the Major. He's been working late, but if I make supper, he appears like magic." In no time at all, dinner was on the table, and sure enough, in lumbered Anchor. He gave the Major a big lug hug. "Your drive force is acting up," Anchor said, like he was receiving a signal from the cosmos. The Major laughed. "And how do you know that?" "A little ferret told me." "Can you fix it?" "Sleep in and see." "Deal." Emily, Anchor, and their 3 daughters were some of the happiest people Major Occam knew, and right now, more than anything, the Major needed to be around happiness, to remember what it felt like to laugh so hard your insides hurt. Only once did the talk turn serious. Anchor asked if there was any news of Chester Newport. "No, nothing," the Major replied. "It's like he's vanished into thin air." Chester Newport was the creator of Occam's Razor, the comic book world where the Major and Emily lived. Now that he wasn't around keeping an eye on things, the forces of darkness were running wild, growing stronger with every day. Emily gave Anchor a look that said, "The Major needs a break from all that," and soon they were laughing again, remembering better times. But the Major's happiness was short-lived, because just as the sun peeked through the trees, the EE button on her Ranger belt buckle, Extreme Emergency, shrieked with a noise like a cat being pulled apart, and the words that followed drove an icicle into the Major's heart. "Monks of Leprosia attacking St. Raphael Orphanage on Lysander. Repeat, monks of..." The Major was sprinting towards the Starship-1 when Emily shouted at her from the treehouse. "Take Anchor!" "Where is he?" "I'll find him. There isn't time. I love you." Whatever Emily yelled back, the Major didn't hear. She plunked herself down in front of the controls of Starship-1 and fired up. She heard the door close behind her and knew that Earwax was on board. "Glad you could make it," the Major said, blasting off. Earwax leapt onto the Major's back and settled on her shoulder. Earwax and the Major had been together a long time, over 20 years. In the real world, ferrets didn't live past 10, but here in the comic book world, Earwax was as young as ever. "Did you have a good time?" the Major asked. Earwax nodded. He spent his evening playing with Emily's 3 girls, who always treated him like the little brother they didn't have. He showed the Major the little sock Tara, the youngest, had given him. It was full of silver flakes. "Oh, moon dust," said the Major, "and probably covered in incantations, knowing Tara." She was a very strange little girl, but strange in a good way, like she was plugged directly into the power of the universe. The Major knew Earwax wanted to know why they were leaving so abruptly. The monks are at the orphanage. Of all the villains in Occam's Razor, the worst, next to the truly evil Prince of Darkness himself, had to be the monks of Leprosia. They traveled the galaxy harvesting organs, attacking out-of-the-way settlements, taking every kidney, every liver, every eyeball, every heart, anything that anybody would pay for, and leaving nothing but desecrated, empty bodies. It was lucky that the Major had spent the night at Emily's. It meant that she was only minutes from the orphanage. What wasn't lucky was the sudden silence as the drive force shut down. Starship-1 glided into a patch of bulrushes, coming to rest on almost solid ground. The Major hopped out and began running, Earwax bounding beside her. With the monks, every second counted. She ran as fast as she could, as long as she could, through fields and woods, over fences, down ravines, up gullies, never slowing. Just when she thought her heart would explode, she sighted the orphanage and kept going. She crept around the side of the building, catching her breath, staying close to the wall till she could see what was what. She reached the corner and stopped. The monk's refrigerated truck, playing the awful organ grinder music that meant a gruesome death to anyone hearing it, was parked a stone's throw away on the dirt driveway with 1 monk guarding. The truck's engine was running, keeping the organ storage tanks nice and cold. The Major reached for her stun gun, but it wasn't there. She had left it at Emily's. The Major looked through a side window of the orphanage. The nuns and older boys and girls were trying desperately to keep the monks confined in the main hallway, using brooms and mops, but just like that, the monks opened fire, and half of the defenders fell to the floor stunned. The Major sprinted towards the truck. There wasn't time for anything fancy. Occam's Razor, keep it simple. The guard raised his weapon, but the Major didn't stop. On she raced as the monk took aim, waiting till he couldn't miss. Just before he squeezed the trigger, Earwax, coming through the truck from the other side, threw himself at the monk's face. The monk fell backwards out of the truck into the dirt, trying desperately to get the weasel thing with the sharp claws off his face. The major picked up his gun. She hated killing, but the monks of Leprosia were an exception. But before the major could pull the trigger, the monk lay still. Earwax stopped, not understanding. The major shrugged. Monk's heart must have given out. And this time, there won't be a transplant. The major put her palm on the truck horn and pushed. The sound was deafening. She ducked down as the monks came streaming out of the orphanage. When they were halfway to the truck, she stood up, rammed the gas pedal down, and charged into their midst. Bang! Thud! A scream. And she wheeled around. 3 more of the monks were down, one of them sitting up aiming his gun at her. 6 more were running for the woods. She drove over the one sitting up, but not before he'd blown a hole in the radiator. The major pulled hard to the left. If she could make it over the lawn, the ground fell away, becoming a steep hill with a lake at the bottom. The monks were nothing without their truck. As she reached the top of the hill, the major applied the brakes and the truck shuddered to a stop. One push, and that truck would be gone forever. She and Earwax hopped out, only to be greeted by 100 screaming kids waving their arms, running toward them as fast as their legs would go.